Death was one step away from American women. Who was their serial killer? Was he arrested or is he still at large? Stay with me until the end of this extremely terrible story to meet a dangerous person. The term serial killer should be considered strange with Ted Bundy. When this word is heard, everyone remembers a heartless and ruthless killer. Even thinking about his crimes causes terror. Before he was executed in 1989, he confessed to murdering 40 young women in 12 states over a terrifying 4-year period. In this way, he became one of the most terrible killers in American history, and murder and crime have become part of its culture. But what distinguished Teddy Bundy from other serial killers? His charming personality was such that even while he was in prison awaiting execution, many women sent him marriage postcards. What reasons made Ted Bundy commit the murder of young girls and women, including 12-year-old girls? The answer to this question comes back to this devil. Many of Bundy's first victims physically resembled his first friend, who was tall with brown hair. Bundy was born on November 24, 1946 in Burlington, Vermont. Bundy's mother, Eleanor Lewis, married his father, Lloyd Marshall Cowell, at the age of 22. But the father obviously had nothing to do with his wife and child, and after that the mother and son left for Philadelphia to live with the mother's parents. Sometime later, Eleanor's parents, fearing that their daughter would be accused of giving birth to a child illegally, called Ted their child and made him believe that his mother was his older sister. Eleanor and Bundy moved to Tacoma, Washington in 1950 to live with relatives and acquaintances. It was there that Eleanor legally registered another name for her child and Ted Cowell changed to Theodore Robert Nelson and Eleanor took the name Lewis Cowell. Eleanor then married an army cook named Johnny Culpepper Bundy. After Ted Cowell, he changed his identity to Ted Bundy. Over time, Lois and Johnny had 4 children that Teddy spent most of his time taking care of. Ted never seemed to bond with his stepfather. In the book, The Only Living Witness, Stephen Michaud described Bundy's teenage years as unhappy years, so that he considered him a shy child who was often humiliated by older children. Bundy graduated from high school in 1965 and entered the University of Puget Sound on a scholarship. He took courses in psychology and Asian studies, but after 2 semesters, he transferred to the University of Washington in Seattle. Bundy met a beautiful girl named Stephanie Brooks in 1967. The two quickly fell in love with each other. Life became beautiful for Bundy and he was satisfied with his current situation. During the fall of 1968, Bundy transferred to another university and enrolled at Stanford University in Palo Alto, California. Shortly after that, Stephanie graduated from the University of Washington and suddenly the relationship between them ended. Stephanie later explained that she felt that Bundy had no real plans and goals for the future and that she was not someone who could stand up to such a man. Bundy was confused and distracted by the loss of his first love and lost his focus on things. He finally had to leave the college because of the bad grades he got. Bundy began traveling across the country as he tried to forget Stephanie and return to his normal life. He finally decided to visit his hometown, Vermont, where when he was looking for his birth records, he faced a bitter reality that annoyed him a lot. He discovered that his sister was actually his mother and the woman who raised him was actually his grandmother. Bundy entered the university again in the fall of 1969 and passed all his units with perfect grades. He was a man who had a goal to win Stephanie again. However, Stephanie was not interested in resuming her romance with Bundy. Bundy worked hard and became increasingly involved in politics, participating in various election campaigns. In his free time, he worked at the crisis clinic in Seattle, where he met Ann Roll, who later, as his friend, described the life and crimes that Bundy committed in his best-selling book, A Stranger Next to Me. He took up writing. It was during this time that Bundy met Meg Anders, a divorced woman who worked as a secretary. The two gradually became interested in each other and Meg fell in love with Bundy. Bundy treated him kindly and played the role of a father to Meg's little girl. However, Bundy still could not easily forget Stephanie and kept in touch with her by letter and phone. Bundy spent the next 2 years campaigning and completing academic degrees at law schools. At one point, he was called a hero by the Seattle police for saving the life of a 3-year-old child who was drowning. With life back on track and a bright future ahead of him, Bundy graduated from the University of Washington in the summer of 1973 and was accepted to the University of Utah Law School. However, he did not go to college until the following school year because of his relationship with Meg or the job he had secured for himself at the Republican Party office in Washington. During one of his trips for the Republican Party, Bundy decided to meet with Stephanie and relive the good times they had together. Bundy greatly impressed Stephanie, and the interest between the two rekindled, and they even talked about getting married. Meg had no idea that Bundy was secretly meeting with Stephanie. This was while Bundy continued his love for Meg. Stephanie now considered Bundy the man of her dreams and thought of a bright future with Bundy. While neither woman was aware of the other's existence, they were also unaware of the transformation that was taking place for Bundy. For unknown reasons, Bundy started killing women, and his first murder happened only 3 days before the new year. The victims were carefully selected and each had a body and hairstyle similar to Stephanie's. On July 4, 1974, 18-year-old Johnny Lentz became the first gang victim. Joni lived in a big house in Seattle with some of her friends. No one suspected that something bad might have happened to him when he did not come to the table for breakfast. When his absence was prolonged, his friends gradually became worried, and when they went to his room, they were surprised to find his blood-soaked body in his bed. When they removed the blanket from him, they were faced with a heartbreaking scene. Bundy's next victim was Linda Ann Haley, a 21-year-old meteorologist and law student at the University of Washington in Seattle. On January 31, 1974, one of Linda's roommates received a message from Linda's boss that she did not come to work. Linda's roommate went to her room and saw that her bed was made and her bike was next to the room. The day ended and there was no word from Linda. His worried parents called the police and asked for help. As part of the investigation, the police searched Linda's room. When one of the police officers removed the bedspread, he was surprised to see that his pillow and blanket were stained with blood. Another officer found Linda's nightgown with dried blood on it. Investigators could not find evidence of the suspect. While the police officer continued to investigate, Bundy went about his daily life in Seattle and was not the least bit worried about being recognized. In February 1974, without warning or for any apparent reason, Bundy left Stephanie Brooks for good, and Stephanie never heard from or saw him again. In the following months, 7 women mysteriously disappeared in Utah, Oregon and Washington. The method of all disappearances was similar: tall women with long brown hair, and disappeared in the late hours of the day. As the search for the missing persons intensified, officers heard from several witnesses that a well-built man, riding in a car with a mark on his leg or arm, had been seen at several events. Many women he approached called him Ted. No one knew what happened to the girls, until in August 1974, the bodies of 2 people were found in Washington, 4 miles from Lake Sammamish. Investigators came to the idea that Dennis Naslund and Giannis Ott were murdered while being tortured. Few clues were found at the scene, but the similarities between the Washington and Oregon murders quickly caught the attention of Utah investigators. Therefore, 3 states cooperated and came to the conclusion that these crimes were committed by one person. Investigators got their first serious lead on November 8, 1974, when a man in a VW car attempted to abduct an 18-year-old girl, Carol Durant, at a store in Salt Lake City. The girl was able to escape and gave the investigation officers the appearance of the man in his car. While detectives in Salt Lake City were searching for a suspect, authorities in Utah's Bountyville learned that a 17-year-old girl named Debbie Kent had gone missing from Viewmont High School. A witness later said he saw a Volkswagen speeding out of the high school parking lot. Thus, the murders stopped for 4 months until they resumed in Colorado, during which 4 women mysteriously disappeared. Almost a month later, the body of one of the women was found 4 miles away from where she disappeared. After the autopsy, it became clear that this woman was assaulted and killed with a sharp instrument. In Washington, the Taylor Mountains neighborhood became a place where the killer had committed several murders, one of which was later identified as Linda Ann Haley, 21 years old. Finally, on August 16, 1975, detectives found the clue they were hoping for. A highway patrol officer in Granger, Utah reported seeing a Volkswagen on the highway. When the police was checking the car's license plate as per the procedure, the driver fled with his car. The police chased the suspect's vehicle and saw it a few miles down the road parked next to a building. When the police officer asked for the driver's identification, he produced his driver's license, which read Theodore Robert Bundy. Suspicious of the driver, the police officer searched his car and found a pair of handcuffs, some rope, a ski mask, a torch, an ice pick and plastic bags. In this way, Bundy was arrested on the charge of theft. It didn't take long for detectives to find physical similarities between Bundy and the suspect who wanted to rob Carol Duranche. And several witnesses were able to identify Bundy among the police suspects. Although Bundy said he was not involved in the kidnapping and murder of the victims, the police were convinced they had found the man they were looking for and began an extensive investigation into his background. In a few weeks, several witnesses from the Lake Sammamish Park area came to the police headquarters and identified a gang named Teddy who was walking in their area. After inspecting Bundy's apartment, the police found new evidence. They also learned that he was also known in the Taylor Mountains, where several women were found dead, and that he had used his credit card to buy gas in the towns where some of the women had gone missing. Evidence against gangs increased, but he still insisted that he was innocent. While Bundy was being tried on February 23, 1976 for the attempted kidnapping of Carol Duranche, the agents tried to find a connection between him and the other murders. According to the book, A Stranger by My Side, a handsome and polite 29-year-old Bundy changed the course of the situation in his favor during the trial. He appeared confident and calm and behaved in a way that he was very offended by such accusations against him. Although he denied having met Duranche, he could not provide a convincing reason as to where he had been that day. Although he was sure that he could acquit himself from the accusations made by the judge regarding the kidnapping of the girl, the judge found him guilty and sentenced him to 1 to 15 years in prison. But on October 22, 1976, Colorado police charged Bundy with the murder of 23-year-old Karen Campbell. Her raped and decomposed body was found on February 19, 1975, and detectives believed they had enough evidence to link a gang to the crime. Bundy was returned to Colorado in April 1977 and transferred to the Garfield County Jail, awaiting trial for Campbell's murder, scheduled for November 14, 1977. Bundy, who could not bear to stay in prison and begin his trial, planned to escape from prison. Bundy, who had received special privileges to use the Patkin County Courthouse Library, was looking for an opportunity to escape, and on June 7, 1977, he managed to escape from a second-story window. 7 months later, on December 30, 1977, Bundy escaped from prison again. During these months, he ate little and was so thin that he could fit through the hole in the roof of his cell. He went through the hole to the bathroom of his guard's apartment and waited there, and when the situation was suitable, he left the apartment's main door. It took 15 hours for the prison guards to notice his absence. After leaving for Chicago, he boarded a plane and went to Florida. The officers were confused as to where he had gone. In January 1978, Bundy managed to get himself an apartment near Florida State University. He made a living by petty thefts. According to the book, the only living witness, the gang, not satisfied with their new freedom and unable to control their urges to kill others, went into action again. On the night of January 14, 1977, he entered a boarding house and attacked 4 girls in the boarding house rooms. 2 girls died due to injuries, but 2 other girls were saved. The doctor who examined the 2 bodies found that they were initially unconscious due to a heavy blow caused by hitting a hard object, then they were raped and suffocated. Bundy started working again a month later. The parents of a 12-year-old girl named Kimberly Peach reported her missing. Although the police quickly intervened, the girl was not found. 6 days after the little girl went missing, a police officer patrolling a residential area noticed a man driving around in a Volkswagen. The police officer checked the car's license plate number and realized that the license plate was stolen. He quickly sounded the siren and approached the car. The suspect ran away, but the police officer was able to stop him. The officer asked the driver to lie on the ground and approached him. In the meantime, the driver got into a fight with the officer, but the police officer was able to control him and handcuff him. After that, it was determined that this driver is Theodore Robert Bundy. A few days later, Bundy's true face became clear to everyone. On July 23, 1980, Bundy was found guilty of 2 counts of murder and sentenced to death by electric chair. At the same time, he was also accused of murdering Kimberly Leach. His body was discovered a few weeks after Bundy's arrest. Following Bundy's arrest, Seattle authorities were convinced that Bundy's first victim was a 15-year-old girl named Kathy Devine, who went missing on November 25, 1973. And her decomposed body was found a month later. Despite the fact that Bundy had confessed to this murder, he always considered himself innocent. Bundy was finally executed on January 24, 1989 after serving 10 years in prison. During his last interview, he admitted that he killed 40 women. One of Bundy's most famous quotes about his crimes, found in Drive James Dasbin's book Life on the Edge, is, "We are the serial killers of your children, we are your husbands, we are everywhere, and tomorrow there will be more children than you. They will be killed." Bundy's body was cremated after the execution at the request of his family, and his ashes were scattered in the mountains of Washington.